And the International Monetary Fund sees the world economy suffering its worst recession since the Great Depression this year, with emerging markets and low-income nations in Africa, Latin America, and Asia at particularly high risk, with half of the IMF's 189 member countries seeking aid. The Executive Board has agreed to double access to its emergency financing to meet expected demand of about $100 billion. Now, the IMF's baseline outlook is for a partial recovery in the global economy in 2021 if the pandemic fades in the second half of this year, to allow a gradual lifting of containment measures. The pandemic that has spread from the Chinese city of Wuhan to almost every corner of the globe has led to business closures and millions of lost jobs. The grim economic projections continue a reversal from the IMF's outlook from less than 2 months ago. The managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, reiterated the IMF's willingness to use its $1 trillion lending power should the crisis continue for longer than expected, and if there's a second wave of the disease, the IMF may need to bolster its resources. And of course, ahead of the spring meetings of the IMF and World Bank next week, Nairobi-based charity Oxfam has also calculated the impact of the crisis on global poverty due to shrinking household incomes or consumption. And here is what they have to say, that the fallout from the coronavirus spread that has killed more than 83,000 people and wreaked havoc on economies around the world could push around 500 million people into poverty. In its report, Oxfam says the economic crisis that is rapidly unfolding is deeper than the 2008 global financial crisis. Okay, the African Development Bank Group on Wednesday announced the creation of the COVID-19 response facility to assist regional member countries in fighting the pandemic. The facility is the latest measure taken by the bank to respond to the pandemic, and of course will be the institution's primary channel for its efforts to address the crisis. I'm being joined now by the Senior Director, Country Department, Africa Development Bank, Ebrima Fall. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Fall, for joining us on the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right, AfDB is providing up to about $10 billion to governments and the private sector. Is this enough to tackle the COVID-19 challenge, looking at the devastating impact?
Well, as you know, we're in very uncharted territories these days. We believe that the cost, the early estimates we have is that the cost of this, the needs of the continent will be around $110 to $154 billion, likely arising from the disruptions in commodity, financial, assets markets, and also dislocations in supply chains. So what we are contributing together with other financial institutions and of course domestic financing should be able to help, but it has to be a collaborative and a collective effort to try to address this huge gap that is arising from this pandemic.
Money coming as a form of loan or a grant, given that some of these countries like Nigeria are highly indebted?
Well, the money is coming as a loan. Nigeria is what we call one of our middle-income countries. So the monies will come as a loan, but what is good about it is that the cost of the loans is extremely low. Countries at this time cannot access financial markets, and if they do, it will be at prohibitive interest rates. As a AAA rated institution, we are able to access funds below LIBOR, which is currently 0.8 of 1%, and then be able to lend that out at just above 1%. So it's quite a service that we provide for our membership, accessing the markets and providing the funds that they need to do the development work.
Now, there are calls on multilateral institutions like yours for debt relief for African countries as a result of this pandemic. Is African Development Bank considering granting such, particularly for a country like Nigeria?
Well, let me first say that in our package, the $10 billion package that you just mentioned, we are providing some form of debt relief to the private sector by reprofiling their service payments. You will also recall that the president, the president of the bank, 2 weeks ago issued an op-ed where we are calling collectively other financial partners, international financial institutions, to join us to provide some form of debt relief to African countries. The fact is we cannot do it individually as the rating agencies will then penalize us heavily. But if together we can work with other international financial institutions, I think this is something that we should all consider.
And what specific projects will this money be channeled to?
The loans would be channeled, one, to support the fiscal needs of the budget in terms of budget support, fast disbursing budget support loan, but importantly to help strengthen health systems and to respond effectively to the COVID-19 virus, providing more diagnostic centers, for example, manufacturing of medical equipment, etc., and also to help the socially displaced during this time.
Now, 2 weeks ago, the bank launched a record-breaking $3 billion Fight COVID-19 social bond. Yeah. Now, that was the world's largest US dollar-denominated social bond ever on the international capital market. Now, what level of subscription are you expecting from this bond offer?
Well, we saw extremely strong interest with the orders reaching about $4.9 billion. We had about 96 investors, 21 of whom were new in the order book, mostly central banks, treasuries, asset managers, and institutional investors. I think this is a testament to the reputation of the bank in capital markets. Also, it shows our strong ratings and the strength of our investor base. So the fact that we were able to price this bond at 0.75 in these difficult markets is really something special.
All right, so how disrupting has the COVID-19 pandemic been for the infrastructure projects of the AfDB across Africa?
It has been extremely disruptive because, as you know, most governments have seen significant increases in their deficits arising from low commodity exports, tourism dislocations, and low oil prices, etc. So they are not focusing on implementing their infrastructure programs. If you take Nigeria, for example, the government have postponed the $22 billion borrowing program and are focusing on trying to bring the budget back on stream. So we have also seen a need to respond quickly to what the government is trying to do, and then postponing some of our investments to next year, probably.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Ebrima Fowl. He is the Senior Director, Nigeria Country Department of the Africa Development Bank. When Business Morning returns, we'll look at what unemployment rate would be like as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Just stay with us.